I never wore makeup around him. Damon liked women soft, fragile, pliant, like dough beneath careless hands. He said foundation masked truth. Ironically, truth terrified him more than any illusion ever could. Our marriage felt like furniture left too long in sunlight, once rich, then bleached, brittle. Years dragged by in mundane rituals. Burnt toast, muted apologies, mechanical kisses. He believed I wrote poetry for magazines. Barely scraping rent, barely relevant. I let him. Truth? I made $130,000 annually consulting executives twice his intelligence. Tech firms with global reach begged for my mind, yet my husband barely noticed I had one. Hiding came naturally. Invisibility became armor. He enjoyed being the breadwinner. It stroked his ego like silk over stone. His voice would thicken with pride at dinner parties, saying, "She's trying her hand at freelancing," while guests smiled politely, pitying me. I always smiled wider. He never saw the second phone. Never questioned the packages I claimed were book comps. Never asked where I went Thursday nights when Poetry Club met. The lies weren't deep, they were just deep enough, like wading pools of silence. Then came the cough. Persistent, sharp, followed by fatigue, shortness of breath. A gray film settled over everything. My limbs ached like they belonged to someone else. Still I cooked. Still I worked. Still I smiled. Eventually I collapsed. Diagnosis: bilateral pneumonia, near sepsis, dangerously low oxygen levels. Hospital staff scrambled. ICU machines hummed. Nurses whispered. I drifted. He didn't visit the first day. Nor the second. On the third, Marielle arrived. Blonde, efficient, exuding lavender lotion and gentle indifference. "Your husband asked me to keep him updated," she said, adjusting wires with detached kindness. Days blurred, dreams, alarms, breathing tubes. I wondered if he'd bring tulips. He knew I loved tulip. He didn't. A week passed before his footsteps echoed down the hall. I heard his voice through the door. Light, almost cheerful. "She's stable now? Great. Let me know if anything changes." He never came inside. I started waking up more. Lucid, alert, aware. Each hour brought reality closer. My inbox overflowed with concern from clients. My bank account, hidden beneath layers of LLCs and shell firms, grew. And yet, nothing from him. I asked Marielle once, "Has my husband been here?" She blinked. "He's been busy. Work, you know." Lies. I knew those eyes. I invented that voice. Week 3. I sat upright for the first time. My chest burned like betrayal. That's when I noticed the envelope. It rested beside the hydrangeas sent by my assistant. Cream-colored. My name scribbled in his loopy, hurried script. I opened it slowly. Divorce papers. No note. No explanation. No heart. Tears didn't come. Not even anger. Just silence. That chilling, sterile quiet you feel after surgery, when something essential's been removed and you haven't realized what yet. I laughed. Laughed so hard nurses ran in, thinking I'd snap. Maybe I had. He divorced me while I was unconscious. When I left the hospital days later, walking with careful steps, lungs still learning how to breathe again, I knew I'd never return to that apartment. Not to the wine glasses still stacked in the dishwasher. Not to the closet where he'd folded his shirts like museum pieces. Not to the ghost of a woman I used to be. I packed only essentials. The second phone, a designer coat he never noticed, my notebooks, and a necklace I bought myself during my first $10,000 month. That necklace cost more than his entire wardrobe. No goodbye. No confrontation. He didn't deserve my rage. Instead, I sent a courier to deliver one simple message to his new address. Because yes, I found it. I had access to things Damon never dreamed of. The note read, "Thanks for the freedom. I hope she's everything I wasn't." Underneath, a Polaroid of my smiling face. Fresh out of surgery, 4 still attached, middle finger raised elegantly. I disappeared after that. Took a train across 3 states. Settled into a condo overlooking the water. New city. New name. Same brilliance. Every day I wrote code. Advised CEOs. Signed NDAs. Wore silk robes. Ate strawberries at midnight. Each decision made with elegant precision. Each breath a rebellion. I was not broken. I was becoming. One night, sipping red wine while overlooking the skyline, I searched him online. Damon had posted engagement photos with her, Marielle. Same soft blonde hair. Same lavender aura. Caption read, "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it." They met while I was dying. I laughed again. That's when I saw Julian for the first time. In a photograph from a tech gala. Standing beside a startup founder I mentored anonymously. Raven hair, lean build, tattoos tracing his wrists like secrets. He wasn't smiling. Just staring into the camera like he knew it would matter someday. I decided then I would find him. Not because I needed anyone, but because I wanted to feel something again. I found him on a Wednesday. Rain slicked the city, neon signs dripping light down windows like honey. My heels echoed through the co-working space where I held meetings behind tinted glass. I liked watching men in suits squirm under my silence. Julian worked one floor above. He didn't know I existed. Not yet. But I'd seen him, studied every line of his body, every laugh not given freely, every flick of his fingers while sketching on tablets. He designed immersive interfaces, flawless UX. His reputation was sharp, whispered, wrapped in scandalous rumors. Slept with clients. Never stayed long. Left behind moaning reputations and disrupted algorithms. I wanted him. Not for love. For curiosity. For desire. For something visceral. I arranged it easily. A partner at Sable Tech owed me favors. I requested Julian be sent to pitch their prototype to my alias, Lena Vale, the shadow CEO no one had seen. I wore a black pantsuit, neckline low enough to distract, eyes rimmed in kohl, lips blood-red. He entered my office like he owned gravity. No umbrella. Just wet hair pushed back and an amused look, as if life only entertained him in fragments. "I'm Julian," he said, voice low, steady, deliberately slow. I didn't blink. "Lena. Sit." He smirked, noticing the game before playing it. Smart. The presentation barely lasted 15 minutes. I already knew the product. I helped design its core engine 2 years ago. This wasn't business. This was foreplay. Afterward, I leaned forward. "Dinner." He raised an eyebrow. "That a question?" "No." He paused. Tilted his head. "You always this direct?" "Only when I want something." A beat passed. Then he stood. "Pick me up at 7. We ended up at a Japanese place where everything was minimalist. Slate plates, nameless sauces, soft music. Julian drank sake like he'd done it with strangers before. I picked apart salmon sashimi with chopsticks dipped in lust. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't flinch when I didn't offer answers. We spoke in coded truth. I told him I liked destruction. He told me he preferred beginnings. I told him I had a thing for untouchables. He leaned in, breath close. "I'm touchable. But dangerous." We ended the night in his apartment, walls painted charcoal, scent of cedar and old books wrapping the air. He pressed me against the kitchen counter, lips grazing mine like a challenge. I bit his lip. He carried me to the bedroom without another word. Clothes fell like lies. He took his time. Hands rough. Mouth slow. Every movement measured, deliberate, devastating. I didn't moan. I devoured. Afterward, sweat cooling between us, he asked nothing. Neither did I. He slept tangled in sheets like sin carved in linen. I watched him, fingers tracing the tattoo on his back, a shattered sun. I left before sunrise. Days blurred into decadent nights. Sometimes we didn't speak, just met, undressed, collided. Sometimes we walked streets hand in hand like lovers in a movie I didn't believe in. He introduced me to people who knew him only as a myth. We drank, danced, kissed in alleys. He never asked what I did. I never told him my name wasn't Lena. Our games grew darker, bolder. We played with silk ties, blindfolds, mirrors. I whispered lies into his ear while he gripped my hips like prayer. I dared him to take me in public bathrooms, rooftop stairwells, parked cars in quiet corners. He never said no. Power was aphrodisiac. He let me lead. Until he didn't. The night he tied me up, blindfolded me, whispered his rules, I shattered. I screamed into his mouth, cried into his hands, came until my throat ached from begging. After, I curled beside him, raw and wrecked, skin glowing. He whispered, "Who are you really?" I kissed his jaw. No one. But I wasn't no one. I was the woman Damon divorced without blinking. I was the bank behind 3 startup. The face behind no company. The name on none of the documents, but the ghost in every algorithm. And now I was the shadow behind her dreams. Because Marielle, the nurse who'd changed my 4 bags while secretly fucking my husband, was opening a wellness spa. Mind, body, soul. A tagline so dull it hurt. Funded by a mysterious investor who promised to make her a household name. She had no idea that investor was me. I'd named the shell company Nyx Holdings. Goddess of Night, Mother of Vengeance. When I signed the funding contract, I wore a red dress, a black veil, no smile. My assistant asked, "Do you want her to fail?" "No," I replied. "I want her to rise. And then I want to be the one who watches her fall. Not with lawsuit. Not with public scandal. With silence. With precision. With the kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but burns." Julian noticed the shift. He started sleeping with one eye open. "You're pulling away," he said one morning, while feeding me grapefruit slices. I shrugged. "Maybe you're pulling closer. You're not like other women," he muttered, more to himself than me. "Is that a compliment?" He studied me. "That's a warning." We didn't speak for 4 days after that. Then he showed up at my door, rain pouring, shirt soaked, holding a book of poetry I once mentioned liking. I let him in. No words. Just hands. He kissed my scars. He traced my ribs. He whispered promises he'd never keep. And I believed none of them. But I let him speak anyway. Weeks passed. Marielle's spa launched. Glossy brochures, polished interviews, photos of her in silk robes beside candles and cucumber water. Damon was in the background, thin, graying at the temples, smile forced. They married in a private ceremony by the ocean. I watched the livestream while Julian tied my wrists to the headboard. He kissed down my spine as I whispered their vows aloud. To honor and cherish. He thrust harder. In sickness and in health. I moaned louder. Till death do us part. I came as they kissed. Afterward, I deleted the video. One night, Julian brought someone new. Her name was Celine. Hair like ink. Eyes sharp. A smile that knew things. He said, "She's curious." I said, "So am I." We drank. We danced. We kissed. Then we undressed. Celine tasted like fire and regret. She whispered secrets between my thighs. Julian watched, hands fisting sheets, until I pulled him in. We didn't stop until dawn. I didn't need them. But that night, for the first time in a long while, I wanted to feel held. And I did. Until I remembered who I was. I stood on a rooftop weeks later, wind threading through my coat. Across town, Marielle's spa was hosting an investor gala. She was wearing a dress I'd chosen. She was drinking wine I'd selected. She was standing under a chandelier I'd paid for. I smiled. Julian called. "Where are you?" "Nowhere," I whispered. "Are you okay?" "Better than ever." But I didn't answer when he said my name. Because he said Lena. And she no longer existed. There's a moment between the first sip of wine and the warmth hitting your throat when time slows. That's where I lived now, between the pour and the burn. Not quite drunk. Never quite sober. Perfect clarity wrapped in indulgence. Julian traced the rim of my glass with one fingertip, his other hand resting on my thigh, possessive without pressure. "You're elsewhere," he murmured. "I'm always elsewhere." He leaned in, lips brushing the shell of my ear. She texted me. Celine. He nodded. Curious or craving? He smiled against my skin. Both. I didn't flinch. I'd open that door. Let the devil in with a glass of bourbon and an invitation. And I knew once Celine tasted something, she never forgot the flavor. Neither did I. But this was not about Celine or even Julian. This was about honey. Sweet. Sticky. Fatal in excess. Marielle's spa took off. Featured in 2 wellness magazines. A segment on morning TV. She started wearing all white like a sanctified ghost. Damon always behind her, arms around her waist like chains disguised as affection. I watched every second. She didn't know I owned 60% of the brand. Didn't know her logo, that dreamy lotus floating on water, was my design, originally meant for a silent meditation app one buried after the divorce. Didn't know I met with her COO weekly. Didn't know I'd structured her investor deal with a clause that triggered a hostile acquisition if she missed a quarterly goal. And she didn't know she was about to miss it. The numbers didn't lie. Demand dipped. Overhead climbed. Her expansion to Denver flopped. A single week of slowed revenue would be enough. Just one breathless pause. Just one bad decision. She made it unknowingly, offering free promo packages to influencers without calculating cost margins. Her assistant, inexperienced, failed to flag it. I smiled when the invoice hit her desk. The countdown began. Julian kept watching me. Like he was learning a language I didn't speak aloud. "You're not sleeping," he said one night, while brushing strands of hair from my cheek. "Dreams are inefficient." He frowned. "Do you ever rest?" I stopped the day I found divorce papers in a hospital bed. He never asked again. Celine returned the following weekend. No announcement. Just walked into my loft like she'd been summoned. Julian followed behind, lips bitten, shirt half-buttoned, looking like temptation personified. I raised an eyebrow. "Together?" Celine laughed. "Separate. But not really." She poured herself whiskey. No ice. Drank it like venom. "I've been thinking about you," she said, gaze pinned to my mouth. "You should stop." I never do what I should. Neither did I. We unraveled slowly that night. Celine painted poetry down my back with red lipstick. Julian knelt between us, worshipping skin like scripture. Our limbs tangled. Our breaths synced. My moans turned to mantras. They didn't know who they were worshipping. But they worshipped anyway. I watched them sleep afterward. His arm over her waist, her head against my shoulder. I was the sun between twin moons. I wondered what they'd do if they knew the woman beside them orchestrated ruination while wearing silk and smiling softly. Would they still love me? Did they already? The morning the quarterly report landed, I wore white. Like Marielle. But mine was silk, not linen. Mine whispered luxury, not illusion. I walked into the boardroom of Nix Holdings, my shadow empire, and took my place at the head. My assistant handed me the file. I read the numbers once, then signed. A silent acquisition. Effective immediately. Her name would remain for 3 months. A transition clause. Polite, professional, surgical. But behind the scenes, every decision was now mine. I didn't tell Julian. I didn't tell anyone. The silence tasted like strawberries dipped in arsenic. 2 days later, Marielle called. She didn't have my number, but she found me through a web of assistants and gatekeepers. She sounded strained. I don't understand what's happening. There's been a shift in ownership? Something about a restructure. I sipped coffee. And you're calling me because? There was a pause. Her voice cracked. You're the one behind Nix, aren't you? I didn't answer. You were my patient. I was your silence. She gasped. Why? You married him while I was bleeding through tubes. She stammered. You think I don't think. I know. Another silence. You can't take this from me, she said finally. I smiled. I already did. Then I hung up. Julian noticed my mood that night. You did something, he said. I raised a brow. What makes you think that? You walk differently when you've won. I laughed. Maybe I always win. He stepped closer, lips brushing mine. That's why I stay. I tilted my head. Do you want to leave? No. Then he paused. But I want to know you. You do know me. Not Lena. That stopped me. I don't care what your name is, he whispered. But I want the truth. Even if it cuts. I looked into his eyes. Truth. I whispered. He nodded. I kissed him. Deep. Slow. Lingering. Then I said, I make $130,000 a year. I own the company that funds your ex's favorite yoga retreat. I had pneumonia when my husband divorced me. And I'm not sure I know how to love without turning it into war. He didn't move. Then he said, okay. The first time I cried was in Celine's lap. No sex. Just her fingers through my hair, soft humming, the kind of silence that didn't demand anything. She didn't ask what broke me. She just stayed. Julian sat beside us, stroking my leg gently. We didn't speak until dawn. I didn't know if this was a threesome or a love story. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But I felt held. For the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was surrendering. Weeks passed. Damon tried to contact me. A burner number. A hesitant text. Can we talk? I didn't reply. He sent another. I didn't know. About the money. About everything. Still nothing. Then. She left. Of course she did. Marielle's face had appeared in tabloids beside financial mismanagement headlines. She looked like a ghost of the woman who once stood beside hospital machines and kissed my husband while I flatlined. She left him alone. Broke. Humiliated. Deserved. But I didn't reply. Not yet. One night, Julian lit candles. Celine brought wine. They dressed me in velvet and pearls, said nothing, just watched as I descended the stairs like a queen returning to a conquered kingdom. We danced in the dark. I kissed them both with hunger. I let them worship. Then I whispered, he asked to talk. Julian's jaw tightened. Celine tilted her head. What did you say? She asked. I didn't. Julian stepped behind me, lips brushing my neck. Are you going to? I looked out at the city. Lights blinking. Lives happening. I said, yes. Because vengeance is never complete until they see who you've become. I chose the cafe carefully. Quiet, high-end, hidden behind overgrown ivy and black iron gates. A place where broken hearts wore designer sunglasses and no one dared ask why. I arrived 10 minutes early. Ordered black coffee. No sugar. No cream. Nothing soft. Damon arrived late. Of course he did. He hadn't aged well. His hair thinned. His jawline softened. Eyes dulled. The man who once made me feel like I had to earn love now looked like someone who had lost his reflection somewhere along the way. He hesitated before sitting. I didn't rise. Thank you, he said, almost a whisper. For what? I asked. He looked down. Showing up. I sipped my coffee. You begged for it. A long pause. Then, I made mistakes. Which one specifically? I shouldn't have filed. Not like that. I tilted my head. While I was dying? His face crumpled, but I didn't blink. I thought you were going to recover, he said. I thought I couldn't do it anymore. We were already over. I finished. Then why marry her before the body was cold? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. Was it guilt, Damon? Loneliness? Or did you really believe she loved you? She did. No. She loved the man she thought had control. The man who talked over dinner. The one who thought he held the leash. She didn't know. She didn't care. Silence. I watched him crumble in real time. Like glass pressed too hard at the edges. A man who thought control was love and silence meant devotion. I was both once. Now I was neither. Why are you really here? I asked. He sighed. Rubbed the ring finger that no longer bore metal. I have nothing left. I laughed. Oh, Damon. You never had anything. He blinked. I had you. No, I said. You had a version of me you curated. A small, silent woman who hid her success to protect your pride. You didn't love me. You tolerated the version of me you could manage. I know that now. Well done, I whispered. You learned nothing too late. He leaned forward. Can we start over? I stared at him, unflinching, unfeeling. No. You don't even want to think about it? I already did. That's why I'm here. He deflated. A balloon with no strings left to pull him skyward. Is there someone else? There are two, I said calmly. And they both make me feel more than you ever did. Shock flickered across his face. Ego bruised. I watched it happen with detached delight. They love you, he asked. They see me. He lowered his gaze. And that was the last time I saw the man I married. Not because I left. Because in that moment, he became a stranger. Julian was waiting when I returned. Shirtless, sprawled on the couch, sketchbook in hand. He looked up, read my eyes like scripture. Done. I nodded. He smiled. Held out his hand. I walked into him without hesitation. He kissed me like he'd waited a lifetime. I let him. Celine arrived later. Black lace. Smudged eyeliner. A bottle of wine cradled like a secret. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. That night, I danced. Music echoed off glass walls. My body moved like silk in wind. Julian and Celine watched, rapt, reverent. I stripped for them. Not just clothes. History. Pain. Every false smile. Every hospital beep. Every sleepless night beside someone who never looked back. I shed it all. When I stood bare beneath soft lights, they didn't look at my body. They looked at me. And I, finally, looked back. Weeks turned to months. The spa was rebranded. New colors. New philosophy. More money. Less pretense. Marielle faded from view. Quietly. Without scandal. I made sure of it. I didn't want her destroyed. I wanted her forgotten. That's worse, really. To be erased from relevance. To be a whisper where once there was applause. Julian launched his own agency. Celine became creative director. I funded it anonymously. They never asked how. We lived between rooftops and runways. Between meetings and midnight kisses. We didn't define it. We didn't ruin it with language. We simply existed. In love. In lust. In something richer. One night, lying between them, Julian whispered, "Are you happy?" I stared at the ceiling. Then turned to him. "I'm not haunted anymore." Celine kissed my shoulder. "That's close enough." I smiled. I visited the hospital once more. Alone. Walked the halls. Sat in the same room. Same chair. Same 4 drip poles still mounted. The nurse didn't recognize me. I stared at the wall for an hour. Then stood, turned off the lights, and whispered to the ghost of the woman who almost died there. "We're not done. We've only just begun." A month later, I wrote a letter. No name. No address. No return. Just a single note, folded neatly in white paper. It said, "You thought losing me was the end. But it was just the start of everything I became." I left it on Damon's doorstep. Not for him to reply. Not for him to understand. Just for him to know. The world still spins. But now I spin with it. Head high. Heart full. Honey in my blood. Fire in my bones. And not once do I look back. Not once.